All right, welcome back to another masterpiece of mediocrity. A game so questionable even stockfish would need therapy after analyzing it. By move 5, it already feels like a battle to see who can disappoint their ancestors faster. Every blunder hits harder than a breakup text, and every plan I make dies 2 moves later. This game is such a disaster, it's almost emotional. So many blunders and missed chances that you might actually cry watching it. I mean, seriously, I didn't blunder my queen once, I did it twice. And my opponent? Oh, he made sure to grab every single opportunity like his life depended on it. But here's the plot twist. After all that chaos, pain, and stupidity, I still won. Yeah, even the chess gods were confused that day. So grab your popcorn, because this isn't strategy. This is pure chaos disguised as chess. Let's dive into the beautiful disaster I proudly call my game. So as usual, the game starts with e4 and e5. Nothing fancy, just the classic opening. Then I go d4. He replies with d5, and I take his e5 pawn. He immediately gives a check with his bishop on b4, and I block it with c3. I probably should have blocked with knight c3 instead, but anyway. He pulls his bishop back. I develop my knight, and then he takes my pawn on e4. Now my knight is under threat, so I move it to d2. And then he suddenly realizes, oh no, my pawn is under attack. So guess what he does? He tries to save it by playing queen d4. At first, I honestly couldn't help but laugh. And then I just went ahead and captured his queen. He responded with pawn to h5, trying to act like nothing happened. I developed my knight to c3, and then he played bishop to g4, putting pressure on my queen. I calmly blocked the threat with bishop to e2, and then out of nowhere, he moves his rook to h2, like he's planning some deep 5D chess strategy that even he doesn't understand. Now here, I had two options. I could capture his free pawn on e4 with my knight, or I could trade bishops. Of course, the free pawn looked way more tempting, so I went for it. Then he pushed the same h5 pawn again, the one that was actually protecting his bishop on g4. And the moment he did that, I didn't wait a second. I instantly captured his bishop on g4. After that moment, things didn't really go my way anymore. He pushed his pawn from h4 to h3, and I decided to go for a short castle. Only after castling did I realize I could have just taken that h3 pawn with my bishop, but it was too late. Regret was the only move left on the board. I thought he'd take my g2 pawn next, but instead he played rook to h4. So now I finally took his h3 pawn with my bishop. Then he pushed f5, attacking my knight, but I simply captured his f5 pawn with the same bishop. Next, he played knight to h6, attacking my bishop again. I moved my bishop to g5 and thought, all right, if he takes my bishop, I'll just capture his rook with my other bishop. Sounded like a solid plan. And then he actually took my bishop with his knight. So I followed my plan, took his rook with my bishop. Everything was going great until he shocked me by taking that bishop too with the same knight. I just froze for a second, like, wait a minute, I didn't even think about him taking my other bishop. After that painful setback, I took a moment to think. Then suddenly I spotted a move, queen to f5 check. I thought, all right, I'll give this check. He'll move his king around somewhere, and then I'll take his knight. Perfect little revenge plan. So I play queen f5 check, and he blocks it with knight to g6. But that doesn't stop me. I can still capture his knight anyway. Then I start thinking, wait, I've got more pieces, more resources. Maybe I can actually checkmate him right now. The problem was, I had no idea how to checkmate him. So instead, I just kept giving random checks, hoping the game would eventually declare a checkmate on its own. I mean, why think too much, right? But the game didn't do me any favors. And in the end, I somehow managed to blunder my queen. All right, it's time to make a new queen. I play rook to e1, though honestly, the rook from f1 would have made a lot more sense there. Anyway, he plays bishop to b6, putting pressure on my d4 pawn. To protect it, I move my rook to d1. Then he goes king to g7. My knight was hanging, so I push my pawn to e6 to cover it. He responds with c6, and now I finally bring my f1 rook to e1. Probably a bit late, but better than never. He plays bishop to d8, and here I actually could have captured that bishop, but I just didn't see it. Instead, I went for a pawn trade on d5. Then he played knight to c6, and now his bishop was protected. That's when I noticed. I could have taken that bishop earlier, but well, too late for that, so I just traded my knight for his bishop instead. Then I pushed my pawn to e7. He moved his knight somewhere, and I decided to support my pawn by bringing my knight to c7. He played rook to c8, but by that point, it was too late. I pushed my pawn forward and finally promoted to a queen. Instead of taking my queen, he thought it was better to capture my knight, so I played rook to d7. Now, if he takes my rook, we'll just trade rooks, and if he tries to save his rook, I'll simply capture his knight. But he did neither. Instead of moving his rook or knight, he played king to f6. At this point, both his rook and knight were hanging, so obviously I took the free rook. Then he finally saved his knight by moving it to g5. All right, now I clearly had the upper hand. More pieces, more resources. This time, I was sure I could finish him off. I played queen to e7 check, he moved to king f5. Then queen c5 check, king g4, queen c4 check, and king h5. I was trying to set up a checkmate, but honestly, I had no idea how. So I played rook e5, he went king g6, I gave another queen e6 check, and that's where it happened. I blundered my second queen. Yeah, 2 queens, both gone. Same game. Don't ask how. I still don't know. Anyway, I captured his knight. He attacked me with his king, so I moved my rook to a safe square. Then he came after my rook again, and even though my rook was safe, I still didn't feel safe for some reason. So I shifted my rook to e3. Now it was completely secure. He tried once more to chase me with his king, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. I just started clearing out his pawns with my rook, preparing to make another queen. He pushed one of his pawns forward, but that wasn't going to save him. I moved my rook to a7. Then he played king to f4, probably thinking that if I took his pawn, he could capture my rook. But that wasn't possible. My rook was protected by my pawn, so I took his pawn anyway. After that, he just kept moving his king and pawn around, trying to survive, but it was pointless. I eventually promoted my pawn to a new queen and checkmated him. Yeah, after all that chaos, all those blunders, I actually managed to finish the game with a win. And that's how the madness finally ended. A game full of blunders, missed chances, emotional damage, and somehow a win. I don't even know how I pulled it off. Maybe luck, maybe divine pity. I blundered 2 queens, lost every possible advantage, and still walked away victorious. If this game teaches anything, it's that in chess and in life, sometimes you don't need brilliance. You just need your opponent to play slightly worse than you. Anyway, thanks for watching this beautiful disaster. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because if I can win this game, anything's possible.